Header Footer Gallery and this podcast are part of the New Media Caucus, an international nonprofit association formed to promote the development and understanding of new media art. We represent and serve artists, designers, practitioners, historians, theorists, educators, students, and scholars. Recognizing new media art to be inherently interdisciplinary, multimodal, and evolving, we support and advance a wide range of inquiry to catalyze further evolution in the field. The New Media Caucus is committed to extending and sustaining the diversity of our community, board, and membership, to promote an environment of equality, inclusion, and respect for difference. We prioritize inclusion as an ongoing collaborative process of growth that we continually address, both within the caucus and in our field.
Hello everyone, welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of Header Footer Presents. I'm your host Renee.
And I'm your co-host Constanza.
And today we're going to present to you a new format, Icebreaker, where we talk with really interesting people that we think you would like to meet. And now I'm going to hand it up to Constanza to introduce our guest.
Yeah, so our guest today is Rodrigo Guzman Serrano, and he's a fellow Cornellian. He's right now doing his research at Cornell in art history, and he's an art historian, a musician, researching the intersection or the interaction between art, science, and technology. His current research explores the concept of invention and how it can be used to frame and understand contemporary artistic practices that engage with technoscience. So I had the pleasure of meeting him at Cornell, but also we are working together on a grant fellowship, I would suppose it is. And, we've been working together in writing some pieces for /. So, Rodrigo, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself as well and your trajectory as an art historian, a curator, academic?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Connie and Renee. Thank you for inviting me and being part of this inaugural Icebreaker episode. I'm really excited. And yes, as you said, I am an art historian and a curator. I also dabble a little bit with art in my youth, and I have really focused on anything that has to do with art, science, and technology for a long time. That's really what my passion is. I guess that's why I'm in the New Media Caucus podcast. And I have a very weird path, like I guess many of us. I really started working with artists and technology back in Mexico. I am from Mexico, in Mexico City. I'm actually in Mexico City right now, visiting family. I started as an artist. I am a musician, and as a musician and someone interested in sound, I was invited by some artists in Mexico at the time. This is the early 2010s, to work in their projects doing some sound or music. So if you go to the image that I sent you, you will see an early poster of a concert that I did at the Laboratorio Arte Alameda in Mexico City. That's me. Yes, that's an early me. Also with glasses. I had laser surgery later. So I was doing music, and I was invited by artist Tania Candiani. Tania Candiani is an artist, a very successful Mexican artist. She represented Mexico at Venice 2015. But back in 2012, 2011, she invited me to help her to code a talking organ. She wanted a pipe organ to speak in Spanish. So I helped with the coding and with the programming of that. And then I did some concerts back in 2012 in this beautiful 17th century church in Mexico City. That's now the Laboratorio Arte Alameda, a space for art and technology in Mexico City. So my introduction to the world of art and technology was through collaborations with the artists that were interested in technology. I was myself dabbling, as I said, with technology and with art, and that was really what kind of opened my mind. That exhibition that Tania Candiani did at the Laboratorio was it was called 5 Variations. She basically wanted to have 5 machines that kind of translated ideas of sound and speech and things like that from format to format, like in this case, language to music. That exhibition actually won a hybrid award of distinction in hybrid art at Ars Electronica in 2013, and that was very, very, very good because we managed to send that out. So anyway, that was the beginning of all of that. When I saw that exhibition and when I met Tanya and other artists, I was just mesmerized by like all this world of artists working with technology and circuits and things like that, and that's really what started my passion. I started to talk about their practice, and that's what led me to shift, let's say, to a more academic pursuit of those practices.
Very
I was going to
nice.
ask, that's exciting. I was going to say, what type of musician were you? What instrument did you play? And then you started talking to us about this talking organ, which is not something that I was anticipating, which is hilarious. Um,
Yeah, I always, yeah, no, that's interesting. I always start with that because it's so different from what how people know me now.
mhm,
Again, this is more than 15, 17 years ago. And I went to school, to music school for violin and piano and composition. Violin has always been my instrument, and I just really like old stuff, early music, as we call it, baroque music, things like that. Even though I never really trained in organ playing, this was not really an organ; it was just basically a talking piano.
mhm,
Um, that's kind of like where idea came from, to kind of realize some of those ideas from the Baroque in contemporary technology. Something that Connie, you're very familiar with because working with Tim Murray, he talks about like the neo Baroque and all that kind of new sensibility. So it was kind of along those same lines.
absolutely.
It's
That's
also
exciting.
before we started streaming or recording actually. You were mentioning that Spotify in the rap they assigned you an age, and there was what?
Yeah, my age on Spotify for the wrap up year of 2025 was 64, and my top first genre is Baroque because it's mostly what I listen to on my Spotify, which is kind of embarrassing, I guess. But yeah, that's what I use it for.
I don't think it's embarrassing. Constanza, what was yours?
Mine was 65, which I find hilarious
I
as
just checked
well.
mine. It's 21.
Oh, I think that says a lot about us. I don't know.
I
Absolutely.
guess forever young. No. No, but it is interesting because, well, Mexico has like a really, really strong connection with Baroque in particular. Or, well, this is where I get in hot water with some people, and some people are like, no, yeah. In me saying that Mexico didn't really have a Baroque period, it had its own thing that is contemporary with Baroque, but it kind of evolved on its own patterns and things, and it kept going even when Baroque was no longer going in the rest of the world, particularly in Europe. I don't know what do you think about that in particular, because I know it's a controversial idea to say the least.
Yeah, no, that's a whole different kind of worms and kind of worms. And as an art historian, I refuse to engage in that conversation. But I would say that for anybody who's listening to us right now, if they do go to Mexico City, if they make it there, they should go to the Laboratorio because it's an old 17th century church in the middle of Mexico City downtown, and it definitely gives you that inspiration to think about those ideals and transcendence and
Hmm.
spirituality. Um, I don't know if maybe some of the listeners are familiar, but Rafael Lozano Hemmer did a wonderful work there in I want to say 2013 or 14, called Nave Solar, Solar Nave, where he had this suspended rope where you would hang onto the rope and kind of swing yourself and then see your reflection on the nave of this old church being just bursting into flames like it was the Inquisition. It's a wonderful work by Rafael that I saw there as well. So definitely this kind of spaces in Mexico City for sure give you kind of a different idea of what kind of works and practices can engage there, right? In fact, the Laboratorio Arte Alameda started as the Pinacoteca Nacional, meaning
Mm.
the painting museum of the del Virreinato, of the viceroyalty of the New Spain. So it was
Hmm.
actually started as a museum um, of colonial painting, basically,
Yeah.
and then evolved weirdly. It just skipped like 2 centuries of art to become a contemporary art museum. So it's very interesting those connections as well.
So it was 2011. Nave Solar.
Oh yeah. That was a wonderful work. So yeah, many artists that might be familiar with the New Media Caucus people and people who are listening have shown at Laboratorio Arte Alameda, Bill Viola, even Marina Abramovich for some reason as
Oh
well.
my
Yeah.
gosh, Bill Viola was a work that I saw was incredible. I've always wanted to see it in person, and I got to, and I think I teared up a little bit.
We also
Um,
saw. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah,
Elias Olafser.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also really cool. I was going to ask Rodrigo, you talk about your origins as a collaboration between artists creating instruments and playing, right, in these really interesting ways. I'm wondering how collaboration has also, come up in your research, for instance, as an academic and your curatorial work as well.
Yeah, that's something that has always been there for sure. I think I owe that to my experience as a musician, because as a musician you not always but often work in ensembles and with other people, and it's really a collaboration. And this is, even if it's not the core of music, I really enjoy. Sorry, there's like dogs barking here. This is Mexico City after all. So but yeah, so because of that experience as a musician, collaboration has always been part of my practice. And currently in my curatorial and historical practice, collaboration is for sure a very important detail of my practice.
Hmm.
And for instance, when I talk to artists, and you all know that new media, art and technology, digital art is always kind of evolving and changing, right? So we often arrive at, as curators or historians, arrive at places where these practices are in the making, or there's a prototype, or there is a proof of concept of a new technology. So often with these collaborations or conversations is that the artists get a different idea of what the work can be. So unlike, somebody painting in their studio that maybe have an idea in their head, or they're painting from a model, media art and digital technologies are kind of little experiments that are happening, and prototypes, right? So there's always like spaces for those kind of conversations. And I've been very fortunate to have met a lot of artists while they are working. And I like to think that those conversations shape their practice as well, and for sure have shaped my practice.
Yeah, I mean, curatorial, especially when you're working in new media, is really tricky because it's never just, well, it's never is, but it's never just curating, right? Like it's conservation, it's restoration, it's display, it's figuring out the sound has a space, that it occupies space in a gallery, and figuring all these things. And I think it's one of those things that you're very, as a new media curator, you're probably very, very attuned with, I guess, especially as a musician, I'm guessing. Right.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I think, what led me to really change from artistic practice to a more uh, managerial kind of practice in curatorial work. For instance, in the next image that I sent you, this is just an example of the type of exhibitions that I do. I
Hmm.
just share this with you all because this is a show that I did for the Syracuse MFA thesis show. So I'm interested also in not only working with a particular type of genres. This was a show that I was asked to do of the graduating students of the MFA in 2023. And we managed to also take this exhibition to a small space in New York called Ortega y Gasset Projects in
Hmm.
Brooklyn.
Hmm.
Um, and that kind of language in space that Renee you're talking about is really what kind of has made me completely switch from art making to art showing of other people. It was very interesting also getting to know all these different artists, and because they were in the process of graduating, what Syracuse wanted from me was basically to work with them in the last semester, talking
Hmm.
about their thesis work, kind of figuring out the directions, what goes with what kind of work they want to show for their thesis, because they of course have been creating work for actually 3 years, because the MFA at Syracuse is 3 years. So that kind of conversations and shaping up, and also the final putting it in space in the exhibition space that we were given, is really, really interesting as well, and definitely relates to that spatial thinking that you're talking about right
now. Yeah. I really like this little, because it is a little space, and I think those spaces are the trickier ones because sometimes the best ones because you don't have this consideration of how to fill space, right? But at the same time, when you have things that are like audio, video, and they're like fighting with each other, they become really challenging and force you to think in non-conventional ways, which I really appreciate. But in the other thing you mentioned is the students, and I think that's something that as curators we have to do more, like more student engaging with early career artists, because yeah, it's cool working with like the big ones, right? And like you say, oh, like I had this person, right? Work with this other person, whatever. But at the same time, it's the younger generations that are struggling. And this happens to everyone. Like, this is not a new thing, but like every new artist struggles to be noticed. And I always wondered, like, how many artists that were like really talented got left behind precisely because curators were not engaging with that. So I think it's really, really nice what you're doing with these programs. And it's something I also try to do particularly with the header footer gallery, which is incidentally kind of sort of how we actually met the first time because you were one of the winners. It was the Wagner
He received
Mendoza,
the Wagner Mendoza
the Wagner
Whitehead
Mendoza, right?
microgrant.
So
Hmm.
I curated that show, and we did like a little in-person interview that I tend to do with the shows. I wasn't able to do that this year. Apologies to any one of the others artists, but like this year has been wild for everyone. Uh,
now.
but but yeah, no, it was a really interesting thing to meet a fellow Mexican who's engaging in this because what, and I don't know how you feel if this is true or not, but I have this feeling that yeah, we have the Laboratorio Horta Alameda, we have Centro Multimedia, but that's kind of it, right? And then once you see like media artists, Mexican media artists get like some success, they kind of all leave, or that's my perception. I don't know. What do you think?
This is a very interesting question and something that I have myself grappled with in my research as well. The problem, or rather, the condition of mm, digital new media art in Mexico is very precarious. A lot of the artists that I have engaged with and worked with are still in Mexico.
Mm,
However, they often have to rely on grants from foreign institutions or exhibiting elsewhere, especially because Mexican funding structures are very vapid, and they don't have a lot of money. They kind of pop into existence and they disappear. So it's very difficult to rely on those. And of course, there is also a lack of a serious art market. Of course, some people do make it, like Tanya Candeni sells very well, but um, they are the very few, right? So
mm,
I would say it's a combination of both. Mexico also has like a long history of these practices that in my research I've tried to lift up to in the international English speaking scholarship.
yeah,
So to show that this is nothing new in Mexico, and also that not just Rafael that everybody knows
yeah.
is the only
Hmm.
exponent of that. But we can talk about that a little bit later. But going back to the idea of meeting new students, yeah, this is also a thing that I really like to do. I was really glad that I was invited by Syracuse University because also maybe this is more relevant for you all. They do have a track of they call it computational arts or computer arts or something in their MFA, and it's also very interesting. The work that you see to my left on this picture, it's a little iPad. That was a work of an artist whose name is
This
Jason
one?
Epping. Yeah, that's a kind of a series of interactive games made uh, on an iPad where you would
Cool.
use your face to play the games.
Oh, that's so
And not
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would have never known Jason if it weren't because of this opportunity. And Jason is someone who has actually been in the scene for a while. Just looking him up, he's been doing work for 20 years. He was a curator at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, and I didn't know about him until
Yeah.
he was graduating from this MFA, and I got to get know his work. Very, very, very fine media artist. So yeah, that's very important also to look at these kind of places where artists are being, being made, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay, you want to talk about the next image?
Yes. So the previous one was an example of just like general curation. This is an example of one of my earlier exhibitions that I did. This is a co-curatorial project. When I was in Hong Kong, we can talk about that a little bit. I spent some time in Hong Kong. Well, I can just very briefly say I started my PhD at City University of Hong Kong in 2019. If you Google Hong Kong 2019, you will see why I left. There was a big protest movement that disrupted the university. Some people were fired in the university. So I wasn't able to stay. And then December of 2019, January 2020, the pandemic hit. So it was not the perfect time for me to be there academically and professionally. I love the city of Hong Kong. I love the people, but it was a difficult time. Anyway, I did have the chance to do this show in 2021 while I was still in Hong Kong. This was the gallery show of the symposium Art Machines that City University of Hong Kong, the School of Creative Media at CityU, has been organizing since when was the first one? I think 2019 or 2018. And they always have an exhibition component. And what you see here is the entrance to the building, School of Creative Media. And this is a work that it's a collaboration between Maurice Benayoun and Rafik Anadol.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, it was a very
interesting.
It's called Yes, it's called Dialogue. And Maurice wanted two works that were dialoguing with each other. So what you see, I don't know if it's visible in the image, but at the top of the circle and the square, you see two little cameras. They are really Kinect
here, I can
cameras.
See.
And the visuals of each of the works is reacting or interacting with what it sees in front of it, right?
That's so interesting.
But at the same time is the entrance to the symposium and the exhibitions. So as you pass by as a audience member, as a passerby, it also interacts with you. So the works are interacting with each other. As I understand it, the left one, the square one, was the work that Rafik Anadol developed, and the one on the right was the visuals, the work that Maurice developed, and they are interacting with each other and with the audience as you pass by. So it's a very interesting piece. That exhibition was an exhibition, as I said, for the symposium Art Machines, based on submissions of artists for the show. And it was all about like how artists back then, this is 2021, were interpreting or understanding artificial intelligence, machine learning. So I don't think I have another image of that, but you can look it up. It's called Constructing Contexts, City University of Hong Kong, 2021, and we had artworks from all over the place showing like different ways of interacting with the then kind of newish machine learning systems. They were not what we have right now, so it's also interesting to see that in retrospect. But yeah, so this is one of the more like new media digital art exhibitions that I've done.
All right.
That's so interesting. I think it's a really nice way to frame an exhibition, right? You begin your entrance to it, and the first thing you do is interact with these pieces which are in dialogue, right? I thought that was a really nice way of framing an exhibition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a couple questions about your research actually and how that informs your curatorial work. And then I have other questions, of course, about AI, and we'll get to that. But amongst your research and like how you've explained your origin story, essentially, right, with collaboration in digital and media art, I'm curious about the science aspect of it that comes up or that shows up extensively in your work. So much so that I think you told me you take, science and technology studies, and you combine it with your art history research. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I guess science and technology studies has been something that I guess for many of you or the people who are listening, it's really a good framework to think about the practices of media art, art and technology, digital art, art and science, because the way I see it, and also I'm gonna pitch something. I'm gonna do a little self promotion.
Do it.
I
Just do it.
I was recently invited to write a contribution to a volume that is going to come out in 2026 called "What Curators Know," and it's a book edited by
Yeah.
Hannah Starr Rogers, and it's about precisely that idea of how to use STS, or what are the conceptual epistemological underpinnings of curatorial work, right? So Hannah invited me to write a contribution about STS and curating, and so that's really what's gonna come out. I talk about that in that chapter. But what I say in that article is basically that I see the work of curating art and technology as a type of like applied or material STS, a place where you can really make the same or similar types of arguments as an STS scholar would do, but with artworks that are in space. And by that I mean thinking about the co-production, a very STS term, of society and technology, the imaginaries, what Sheila Jasanoff called the socio-technical imaginaries of technology, this idea of like the possible futures that technology presents us with and how they are interpreted by society, right? So our works tap into that and show it to us in a very material, sometimes humoristic, sometimes critical way, in the similar way as an STS scholar would. So that's something that has influenced me a lot as well, and that relates as well with science and not only technology. And in fact, the following image, the next two images or two slides are two exhibitions that I did that actually are my examples in that contribution for what curators know for next year. So the previous one, it's an artwork by Japanese artist Ryo Ikeshiro. And this is a very complicated work to explain with words because it's so physical. I don't know how really to do it successfully. But basically, what you see is it's an empty gallery with two plinths in the middle, empty in the rest of it, where two parametric speakers. So what you see there are two parametric speakers that look like basically like a phone, right? That are projecting sound to the wall. A parametric speaker is something that the best way to understand it is like a laser sound. So the sound is focused on one direction, right? And if you're not exactly in front of the speaker, you don't hear it. It's really like a laser. There is no sound coming from the speaker, except as it bounces from the wall in front of you. So basically, the experience as you are in this gallery is just bouncing sound off the wall that you don't know where it comes from, and and sound coming from places where you clearly see that there is nothing, no speaker, no device, nothing, because it's bouncing off. Basically, the way that the laser does. And in fact, Ryo Keshiro added a laser on top of it so that you can also visualize it, right? But I use this. This is an exhibition that I did at Osage Gallery in Hong Kong called "I'm Always Here," and the reason I wanted to use that work, and the reason I talk about it in the contribution to that volume, the upcoming volume, is because it's also using the same principle, technical principle of these sound weapons that you have heard. I don't know if you have, if you have heard, like in protest movements, some police departments have used this kind of focus sound weapons to disperse crowds. It's using the same technology. So it's showing you also that kind of anxiety about those kind of technologies in Hong Kong. Again, a place that just 2 years before this exhibition, this was 2021, had like a big protest movement, right? So it's a way to show you that in a space where you can reflect on it in a very sensorial and corporeal way. As I said, you enter to this place, into this gallery, you don't see anything, you don't hear anything. You see these little tiny bone-looking things that are projecting sound onto the wall and just bouncing it off, right? So that's an example of what I'm talking about. That I, as I said, talk about in the book. And the next image is the work of another Mexican artist, Maropebo, who's my best friend. And this is on
Oh,
the science side. This is an exhibition that I did at a small space in Ithaca, New York, called The Rest. It doesn't exist anymore. It was in a artist-run space in downtown Ithaca. And I invited Maropebo because she is looking at microorganisms and the different um, collaborations that they exhibit, like in lichens, for instance. A lichen is an organism that is formed by fungi and bacteria and algae. So Maro is thinking about these different things, and the reason I use that exhibition also as an example of this STS thinking is because Maro shows us that the way to understand the natural world
mm-hmm.
can be a combination of science, but also just childlike wonder, and just like amazement with the natural world. The image on the right, you'll see that there is, I don't know if it's very clear, but there's a shelf, a big shelf with like a light and a loop on top of it. And that's a collection of rocks that Maro has collected in different places in Italy, in Mexico, in different places that have rock and lichen, and then that she sculpts with power tools, right? So the first thing is that you're just amazed by the different kind of images and colors that the lichen have, but it's also kind of like a compounding of different timescapes. It's called lichen timescapes. Uh, that collection of rocks, because it has the lichen um, timescape or time frame, the rock, the geological one, and the human as well, because it's an intervened sculpture. So the point is that exhibitions like this one and works like this one shows you also that this is an example of what in STS we call a boundary object, right? Like an object that really can show you can make boundaries between disciplines, but also be a wedge between different disciplinary approaches, right? Science, culture, art, and just like amazement with the natural world.
I find that so enriching just because, often when we think about digital media, it's all about the sleek technology, no, well, not the artifice, but the mechanical, right? But once you start collaborating, this is the word of this podcast today, but integrating the natural world, you start bringing in all these different materialities, all these different, associations and relationships, right? It's very relational to humans. And like you're saying, the natural world and this idea of wonder, right? That is often separated between technology and the natural world, which is, something that comes up for me is when I was talking to my students in my class on like AI and digital media. I said, go touch grass. I mean, let's go out and you know, become much more acquainted relationally with the outside world, right? The natural world. So I really do appreciate works like these a lot.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah, and
laughing.
no, and the title is precisely a reference to that. And the title is actually borrowed from a poem by an
Mm.
Irish poet, Seamus Heaney. I don't know how exactly to pronounce it. I'm sorry. But it's called The Death of Naturalists because we are all naturalists when we are kids, like in the
Hmm.
19th century way of just like walking around in nature and looking at this little rock and this little thing. And then as we progress and we start to think of the world more rationally and logically and
Hmm.
scientifically and taxonomically, that kind of little child is kind of dead, that it becomes like something that we don't encourage anymore. And precisely that was the origin of this work, was to try to bring back that just like amazement with nature, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
think it's really interesting because one of the things that you notice is that generally the impression is that new media art is exclusively computers. That's
Yeah.
like the first, the lay person interpretation is, oh, it's computers and it has to be AI or some computer generated thing or something like that, right? But the thing is, new media art is by definition new media. The thing is, we also have to define, do we talk about new media as mass media technologies like television, radio, blah, blah, blah? Or are we talking about new media in the way that I see it, which is uh, so like the materials that we use to make art. So if you look at it from that perspective, film is one of the first new medias that we had in a long time. But if we really want to be like specific about it, the invention of the tube paint is the first new media that we had in a long time. Like there were developments in painting technologies, but what changed the game was the ability to be able to go out in public and paint al plein air. Hope I pronounced that correctly.
Perfectly well.
Oh, thank you.
Beautifully.
So the ability of doing that changed art making completely. It created like modernism. It created then like all the things that we now think of contemporary or even avant-garde art, contemporary modern. All of those things happened because of this new medium, right? And
Right.
so plants, the use of plants, the use of bacteria, the use of other things, things like for example, what Sterling did with growing, using biotechnology to grow an ear on his arm. All these things are also new media, right? And I think that we have failed a little bit to communicate that in a way. Sometimes it falls into classifying it as environmental art or classifying it into other more entrenched situations, right? But at the same time, it's also a fault of art historians and curators that we sometimes fall in love with the new toy and we
Absolutely.
forget older things that are still fertile, right? Net art didn't die because the internet stopped being open. The net art died because we had a new thing coming up. And then the thing died because then we had a new thing. And you see it with every single time we have a new technology. We had a wow, facial recognition. Oh, now it's AI. Oh, what's going to be the next thing, right? Like maybe quantum computing. I don't know. But the point is, we do have this cult of the new, this fetish, and then also this fetishism for technology that goes both ways. We have people who are technology is always bad, it's going to destroy us. And then you have the other band, which is technology will save us. And I feel that we've lost a little bit of the nuance in our communication. I don't know if you want to talk about that, because I think that's one of the main issues or concerns that you may have with your research specifically.
Actually,
Yeah, for sure.
I have a
Oh yeah,
follow-up
sorry. Continue.
question. No, 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 that's a great way of introducing something that I also wanted to touch upon. You wrote a paper on artificial intelligence, and this
Yes.
brings me to the question of what Renee is also asking, and maybe we can incorporate it a little bit. How do you envision and think about the hype that is artificial intelligence in the arts, and how do you deal with it? What do you think about it? And how does that perhaps incorporate into your research at all?
Oh wow. Okay. So the first thing, yes, Rene, this idea of new media, it's very tricky. I use sometimes the term new media and media art just in speech, just because it's a shorthand, but I never use it in my writing or in my research because I feel that precisely as you said, it's really imprecise. And I also think, as an art historian, I think of it as very historical term, you know. So when somebody uses it in the 90s, I use it, or in the early 2000s, but not, I don't use it myself. I often talk about the relation between art and techno science. And that's something that I have been using more consistently in my writing because I'm interested in works like this one, like Mauro Pebbles' work, that it's reflecting on technoscience because our knowledge of the natural world is definitely influenced by science and technology, the sphere of technoscience, and whatever it implies. Also, like the systems of knowledge, institutions, research institutions, grants, all that's part of technoscience, right? Even if the artwork itself is not technological, right? It has it's not plugged, as you can see. It's just rocks that have been intervened, but it's reflecting on our knowledge of the world through
Mm-hmm.
technoscience. So I try to use more consistently art and technoscience or technoscientific art because I think that's the type of work that I'm interested in writing about. I don't think of it as a replacement of new media or new media art. If anything, it might be like a subsection of it, um, a kind of an idea of artists that are really more consciously thinking about technoscience as a sphere of knowledge, um, as opposed to um, AI art or something like that. That is more about the medium. Which leads me to your question, Constanza. I have to say, Connie, that I kind of did like a a very sharp turn in my research, because back when I was working on that exhibition in Hong Kong with where I showed you with Rafik Nadol and Maurice Benayoun, I thought maybe I was gonna research more AI in my actual research in my PhD. It was 2021. It was not like the super early beginnings, of course, because well, you can also debate whether the beginnings are the 18th century or whatever.
Of
But
course.
in the new contemporary ideas of AR, it was kind of the very the puberty maybe of machine learning and AI. So I thought maybe there was something there for me. But I have to say that that's also around the time where I wrote that paper. Um, I didn't feel like I had really anything to say, because it was just advancing so quickly and so fast, and there was a lot of this hype and everybody was doing it. So I kind of felt a little bit overwhelmed. Um, and my personal ideas about AI is really what I already drafted in that paper, which is our AI or machine learning or any of these kind of systems as a medium, right? I was never convinced back then. I don't know if you remember, but 2020, 21, maybe even earlier, there was this idea of like the AI artist and like
Yeah,
there's no more
absolutely.
need for artists. I think that discourse has waned, I believe, but I was never convinced by that. I always thought of it as like a medium, which is what I think what it has developed into, as another tool, maybe a big tool. Um, uh, and that's how I see it. I always think of Christiana Paul, the curator of digital art at the Whitney Museum, where she talks about these technologies really as a special type of tool in art making, because it's not the brush or the paint of the old, but it's also making the canvas, and it's making the painting itself, it's making the pigments, and it's making the the surface where it's been made. So it's a weird tool. It's not just another tool. It's not the same as like your chisel and your hammer or whatever. It's a mega tool, right? But it's still a tool for art making in my opinion. It's so big that I can't possibly comment on all types of AI and machine learning in
Yeah.
art. But I would say that I do like artworks and artists that reflect on the technoscience of it, like how do we consume AI? How do we use it? How it affects our lives? Connie, you and I have been talking about like how Mimi, for instance, has been thinking about those practices without necessarily like creating like a super technological artwork. Like often her works are very subtle and very physical, right?
Yeah.
So I like when artists reflect on the tool that they're using. Um, but for sure it's not an area that I'm like super up to date, to be honest, because
Right.
I felt that the hype was not giving me what it was supposed to be giving me, right?
Yeah.
Like this overhauling of the art world and all this.
We actually did an episode on AI art, and one of the things that I think came out of that discussion is that, first of all, we have to be able to distinguish between generative LLM, large language models, and the rest of AI research, because it tends to be conflated into this one thing, right? And that
Oh
is the
yeah.
problem, because what we're seeing right now is what happens when the crypto bros and the tech bros failed to make NFTs and Web3 happen, is they clung to a new technology that was easy to grift off, which is LLMs, because LLMs like promise a lot of things. They promise to be intelligent. They promise to do all these things, right? But the thing is, there's other types of AI research which are different, right? They're these machines that are being used to identify cancer cells. Then that's not a large language model. What they're doing is using pattern recognitions and learning to distinguish certain things. And there's this development of interactive independent agents that is used, for example, in video game technology. Well, that's where most of the research is happening, but it's also being used in things like the Waymos, which have been going rogue lately. I don't know if you've heard about that. Don't get in on Waymo, please. But yeah, so I think one of the things is we have to be when we talk about AI, that's one of the problems we had in the art world, is that everybody was laser focused on LLMs over other things. And I remember in 2022, I was at ICEA and I was invited to be one of the first testers, like external testers of ChatGPT in the art world. And it was really interesting because one of the biggest concerns that everybody had was, well, what happens with what I generate? Do I own it? Do you own it? What's going to happen with that? And I think that's what kind of killed, and rightfully so, kind of killed the interest of a lot of people in the arts with AI, is that to feed these massive models, it became a theft machine, right? And we're already seeing the situation happening with Disney making deals with AI, which I'm guessing is we won't sue the living lights out of you, but you will not generate our content, which is a really bad way of dealing with that situation because it only protects giant corporations. But yeah, so I think that is, and it's a good thing what you're saying, realizing that there's a different way of engaging with this, but it is so big and we don't really get exposed to the more nuanced versions of it.
I think just to go and circle back to what Rodrigo was talking about, he's absolutely right in terms of I appreciate also artwork and artists that are being not critical in a negative sense, but thinking critically, I think about these machines, these AI tools, right? Because otherwise you're just succumbing to the hype and not really thinking about, well, what does this mean as in terms of authorship? What does it mean for generating art? What does it mean if something is not original anymore? All these questions come up. And that's why I think you're absolutely right. Mimio Nuaha is one of some artists, right? A collection of artists that are really engaging with AI and digital technologies in very interesting and creative ways that don't adhere to just making more or, replicating the same machines, right? That we are discussing, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that I would say just in my practice that this applies to AI and other forms as well is that I try to avoid making exhibitions or writing about works that are about a format. So I have never made except the constructing context show because that was a conference about AI. But besides that one, I don't really do shows that is like, AI and art or bio art, and if it happens to have wet media, as they call it, or bio art, or net art, or AI. I I use it and I take it, and I try to make the show about something else. And I always try to include artists that are not working on that, so to see what kind of dialogues and conversations these works can be part of beyond that medium specifically. So that's one of the things that I also in my curatorial practice try to expand a little bit. I don't know if I do it successfully, but that's what I try to do.
I actually went to a show in Madrid, which was about AI, but it had not a single work of AI. It was the history of data collection or classification of images. So it had medical illustrations, photography during the early 1910s about archaeological sites, the generation of images of the body, all these things. But it was nothing about AI, but the conversations that the pieces and the text invoked were about AI. And the show was marketed as AI. And it was a really, really interesting show precisely because of that.
Because you have some dialogue, right? And I think that's what's very necessary and missing in a lot of discussions. But that's also the work of the art historian and the curator to make these things happen through collaboration, right? As
For
well.
sure. Yeah. And if I do a show that is about not a concept or a theme, but more like an identity or a genre, I try to emphasize communities or spaces, which is the next image that you have on your deck, which is the latest, yeah, to 2025. We are still in 2025. The last latest show that I've done at the Johnson Museum at Cornell that was about artists of Central New York. It was called Here and Now, Artists of Central New York, and it was just a show that was trying to show artists that are in the state of New York, but not in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
to show kind of just like the really the richness of art practice in Central New York, the Finger Lakes, upstate New York, and that was really something. That's kind of another part of my practice, of a curator practice, beyond like technology and science. Is just like what people that are maybe in what some might consider the margins or the periphery, doing art. This is just an example, of course. This is in New York, but I've also tried to do shows about Mexican artists or other things. Um, but in this show, for instance, there were paintings and photographs and ceramics and some works with technology and video. So all this kind of like different media, but around the idea of like what is being created here in this location, that is
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily represented in a big gallery in New York or something.
Is this structure the part of the artwork, or is this a curatorial decision? Because it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, this is the work of an artist, Heather Swenson,
Mm.
and she makes these billboards. And I also wanted to reflect. I co-curated this show with my collaborator Cameron Cohen. We wanted to show kind of like the vernacular of upstate New York. If you have ever driven through upstate New York or central New York, the Finger Lakes, you will see these billboards and a lot of construction, also decay. I don't know if you can see in the image as well. There's a painting to the right. That's a Andrea Krasner painting of an old factory that is being just being torn down, right? So all this dilapidated construction industry and also this billboard. So it was also trying to talk about the aesthetic vernacular of the region. And yeah, Heather works with these ideas of billboards and public infrastructures as well.
Yeah, because it's really, really like interesting because it's scaffolding. It does resemble the platforms used for like billboards, which I can interpret. Obviously, I'm not familiar with upstate New York or any of those areas. I've never driven through it, but I can grasp, and I think that's the important part, like being able to grasp the meaning behind these works.
It's very easy, Rene. Just imagine a barren landscape, you know. Imagine something that was very, in terms of industry and trade, like very important in the 19th century, and then just like collapsed. No, I'm just joking, but it's like there's a lot of because everything is New York City and Albany, and people move out.
Mhm.
It has beautiful nature as well, but like all that industry that really made uh, New York State and the Northeast very important in the 19th century, early 20th century, kind of moved, right? So this is also this is an economic problem. So anyway, but the point is that it's a very interesting physical space as well that artists are reflecting.
Should we go to the next one?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So in addition, what I have shown you so far has been like more curatorial projects, but maybe we can just talk about other things that I have done or do. This is
Of
just
course.
examples of uh, conferences that I've been part of. The one on the right is I was just moderating a
The yellow
panel, a
one?
conference. The yellow one. They call it the On Conference at the Microwave Festival in Hong Kong. And if you're not familiar with it, or whoever is listening, the Microwave Festival is a fantastic media, digital, new technology art festival in Hong Kong. It has a long, long, long history. I guess it's like 20 years. It's like really long, or maybe more, 30 years. I don't know. But I was just fortunate to be part of that, and it was just the panel discussion conference part of it. But it's one of my favorite festivals of digital art or media art in the world, and it's just like 5 days or so every year. But you should check it out. And the image on the left is the Resound conference for the Media Art Histories conference in 2019. That one I helped organize and curate with Morten Sondergaard in Aalborg in Denmark in 2019. And this is a biannual conference. I think they try to do it every 2 years, but things change. Called Media Arts Histories, that started in, if I'm not mistaken, 2005 or 2006 or something. And this is really one of those big conferences of art, science, and technology. And I was just very fortunate to be working on the one about sound with Morten in 2019. It was a very interesting conference because it's one of those big conferences like ICEA or something. But the theme that we chose was really about sound because we often kind of forget that sound is really a big part of the history of new media art and digital
Mm-hmm.
technologies. A lot of artists working through sound and coming from sound. So we really wanted to to have that theme of that exhibition only about sound and sonic practices, contemporary music, all that kind of stuff. And that was a very successful exhibition and conference, I think. Our keynote was Samson Young, who is a Hong
Mm.
Kong-based sound artist, and that was a fantastic lecture. You can find the lecture online somewhere.
Oh, we can add
Um,
a link to it as well for our viewers to go check out.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, so that's also things that I'm interested in and that I have done. In a kind of a link between like practice and academia. This is obviously an academic conference, but also it has like a public component and an exhibition and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. This is the one that's now taking place in Finland next year, or 2027, I think.
Oh yes, I believe so. In Finland, correct? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar.
Yeah, yeah. This is a conference that I try to go to. It's a weird conference, I have to say, because it's like it's really big also, and because it travels,
Yeah.
every iteration is so different depending on who organizes it. Um, in fact, it was created by my ex boss, Oliver Grau, who was or is an art historian based in Austria, and and he's very hands off when it comes to the to how the each iteration is developed. So yeah, every new edition is very different. So I don't know the one in Finland how it's going to be. Um,
So I actually applied for a position in Helsinki for in the university. What's going to happen? It's part of the project is helping run this thing.
cool.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
it's a really interesting situation because it's a new space in a way. So they're facing a few challenges in terms of how to bring it together, but that's also a really interesting situation to be in because it forces you to create new solutions rather than just fall back into like structures that you
For
already
sure.
knew. But yeah.
For sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
anything else about
And
this
then maybe we
one?
can talk about something that is closer to Rene's maybe than the next image that I sent you. Is also
Oh
something that
God,
has
yes.
influenced my practice, which is, and also this is also, by the way, just chance. By chance, I started working, or rather by necessity, I started working on archives when I was in during my master in New York.
Yeah.
I had a job at the library, so I was just interested in archives because of that. And then I got this job at what's called the Archive of Digital Art, or ADA.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see on the left is a screenshot of the previous version of ADA, and it has now changed. But this is the they claim to be the first archive of digital art. I don't know if that's true or the earlier. I think it started in 1999 or 2000.
Mhm.
It is an early archive. But I had a job. It's based in Austria at the Danube University in Krems, in the city of Krems in Austria. And I don't know, that really made me think about this other aspect that Rene, you're very familiar with, which is how do we care for these things that we talk about and we write
Yeah.
about and that we exhibit, this digital art, bio art, all this media. So this is another aspect of my work is really to think very seriously about the preservation and conservation and collection of these practices. I have been also part of different panels, like the image on the right. That was a panel that the how does it called, the European University at St. Petersburg in Russia. It's a
Hmm.
private university, invited me to be part of in 2020 because they were building a Russian media art archive, right? So as you can see, they invited me. I was at City University of Hong Kong at the moment, but
Mhm.
they invited Wim van der Plaat from ICEA Archives and Michael also from Ars Electronic Archive, just to think about like the different models of archiving, and this is also something that this besides my curatorial work and my research and everything else that that I do, and as you said, Rene, to also be do the sound and music for parties and all that stuff. Media archiving is a passion of mine as well.
What do you think are the biggest challenges? I mean, we've talked about it with Renee and we've published a paper on it, but what do you find, given your work in research in the archives of Ada?
ADA.
I think
Um,
they call it Ada. Yeah.
Ada?
Ada? Really?
Because it's after Ada Lovelace, no? I assume.
Ah.
Ah,
Connie, I never made that connection. So
Me
dumb. I've
neither.
never made that connection. Maybe they did call it because of that. I'm not
I
sure.
think so. But in any case, what do you think has been the biggest challenge or the current challenges that we face today with archiving digital and new media art?
To be honest, Renee and Connie, I think honestly that the biggest challenge is just structural and administrative. We have the
Mm,
knowledge. We know how to do this thing. We have models. We have Renee. You yourself have your own like how to online version of how everybody have access to this.
Part of it,
I think it's just
yes.
a right. I think it's really just a matter of convincing the people who have the money and the institutions to do it. I think that's really
right.
the biggest challenge. It's just a structural, institutional challenge of convincing, the big museums, the big institutions, even corporations and governments that they should be invested in this.
Hmm.
That they should not be afraid. And this is something that I didn't invent this. People have written about this idea of like um, just like the institutional wall that exists around these practices.
Yes.
So one of the things that I'm not involved so much in the archiving per se anymore because I don't work with archives. I am developing some other documentation practices, but one of the things that I try to do is really talk to institutions, to other curators, to other people who have positions of power to think about this more seriously. And even also in academia, um, I always try to provide an archived version of any kind of link or website that I use or refer to in my research. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of like really just mentality of institutions.
Yeah. So going to what you mentioned about like the challenges, I think it's a vicious circle. There's no collecting in big institutions, like a lot of collecting of new media art, because there's no collecting of new media art. There's no interest in the archival of it, because there's no archival of it, history of it. There's no collection making of it. And so it becomes this constant spiral where we're constantly trying to get out of it. And yeah, we have the ADA, we have the ICEA archive, Coded Secrets, which is the project I'm currently on, is also trying to make its own database. It's internal, but it's still a database of artworks. And what I've noticed is that one of the biggest problems, and I don't think we can't really fix it, is the lack of standardization. So
Mm,
ADA values certain things in what it collects, in how it archives it. If you go to the ICEA one, it's a completely different approach. It's very different. It's something else. And then um, you have, for example, the Guggenheim. The Guggenheim has one of the, in my opinion, one of the best like new media, digital art, anything that you want to think of, collecting policies and archival documentation policies, and they make them available to everyone. And they're based on the studies of John Ippolito, the variable media questionnaire, which I'm like a big champion of. Simply because it's the one I've seen implemented the most successful in terms of specifically the Guggenheim, because when you look at the ADA, as much as it's an incredibly useful tool, sometimes there's 3 keywords and a very low resolution image, and that's all you have about our work. And it's one of the challenges that we have. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, Renee, and I don't know how to solve that issue because I don't know if the issue is more standardization or more flexibility, right? Because
mm,
Ada, as I said, I worked there already. It was 2019, so it's already 6 years. It has changed a lot,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But the idea behind Ada was to be like a social archive. Like Oliver wanted to make it like kind of like a social network. You as an artist or as a curator or as a researcher create your own profile and document your own practices.
mm,
That has the advantages of having a broad,
Mm-hmm.
like people from all over the place can apply to this and be part of it. But at the same time, it's not standardized, as you said. Like the for instance, the profile of Rafael Lozano Hemmer is very well kept, and he or his studio updates a lot of things all the time. But other artists don't have the time, or maybe artists who are not in Europe or North America might not have the tools or the language or whatever, because it's only in English. So it is prohibited to some people as well. But the idea is a model of like social archiving.
Yeah.
So all these different models exist. I was when I was working there, I think I was a little bit upset about that idea. I wanted everything to be standardized. But I think now I'm like, maybe more flexibility is okay. Like with the different models, we need different things. Um, what matters is that something is represented somewhere, I think, in some shape or form. That's why I'm a big advocate for documentation as well, because archiving does require some kind of technical knowledge. If you have software-based art or bio art, you really need a very robust way of like preserving and archiving that. But documenting really could mean only just like pictures and good tags and good captions and things like that, and where something came from and who made it and who photographed it, and that's a little bit more easy. We do that already with maybe some of our pictures online. So I'm a big advocate for that. And ADA is, even though it calls itself an archive, is really more of a database of documentation. So I'm okay with those kind of things. But yeah, I do think that as you said, the variable media questionnaire from Guggenheim is one of the most successful, and maybe one of the things that new institutions or even artists, individual artists who want to archive their and document their work should look into, to definitely start looking into that and working towards documenting their work.
Yeah, totally. It's just tricky, honestly, because everybody has different like every institution values different things, and I think that flexibility you mentioned is really important. And this is one of those spaces where you see the problems of centralization, right? Because who created the fields that are available for ADA, right? Who decided
Yeah,
that already shapes what you can archive, say, or do about an artwork. It also tells you so much about what ADA or ADA values, right? And the people who are
for
behind
sure.
it. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the nature of the data. And we have to acknowledge that when we do these archiving projects, because it's not neutral, right?
Absolutely. And when I was working there, as I said, 2019, 2020, they were working on, if you see that image on the navigation menu, you see the thesaurus. They were working on developing this thesaurus of terms for new media. And really the idea was to create these labels and genres and formats and describe them. But it wasn't, as you said, exactly as you're saying, Renee, it wasn't very successful, I think. And I think right now they have abandoned that idea because they couldn't manage how they couldn't really land the idea of who is the voice to talk about the like what bio art is, right, or what VR is, or what kind of genres exist within media art or something. As you can see, also the archive of digital art was previously called the database of virtual art.
Yeah.
And now virtual art is something that I haven't heard in like 15 years. Nobody uses that term. So then you go with this problem, right? Like again, that the thesaurus was trying to solve, but I think they didn't solve it, precisely because of that lack of maybe transparency or I don't know, like inclusion of different voices when it comes to creating labels,
Yeah.
metadata, this kind of stuff,
Even the name.
standards.
Even
Yeah,
the name tells you something, because digital art and before that virtual art, like it's still very computer focused.
Yeah.
for sure, exactly.
So you
Exactly.
have to question how do you reconcile that with some of the practices that you just shown us? Like they would not fit in the ADA technically if you just go by the name. If you're someone that's not super familiar, you want to archive your work, you walk into this and you find that it's the archive of digital art, then you might have second thoughts, right?
Yeah, exactly. For
Perhaps
sure.
it's a issue of updating. Because I think, like you were saying, Rodrigo, virtual art is quite an antiquated term already. Digital art is something that is used, but I think it's becoming more, especially with the AI art thing, it's becoming much more mainstream. So, like, how do we differentiate contemporary art with digital art or new media, right? But also, like you were saying, Renee, it's whoever designs or creates these databases, like they're not neutral for sure. And that's the whole idea about behind data, right? And I think in the case of Ada, perhaps, they still have very traditional views of what digital art is, and they haven't quite updated on what's going on now. Maybe it's a problem of that. Um, this updating, I think, of the terms and the histories, for example.
Right.
There's also something very European about this. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the thing is, in America, generally when we talk about digital art, it kind of means illustration. Like for example, when someone says, I do digital illustration, digital photography, digital whatever. Whereas in Europe, digital is interpreted as data structures. So something that's digital could be, for example, so if we talk about a body, a digital body would be, for example, your data information on the NHS or the National Health Service. Uh, so you can see there already a difference just by the culture that's creating the thing. And obviously,
Absolutely.
when they think of digital, they don't think of that thing. And one of the things when I was writing the manual that Rodrigo mentioned, is the discussion was between is what is digital art versus what's new media art, and the conclusion is digital art, it replicates analog methods without adding any computability into them. Whereas now, if I have that discussion in Germany, for example, the discussion is completely shifted, and it's digital art. It's art that deals with data structures, whereas uh, new media art deals with different media in different formats, but still focus on the computer.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm always very hesitant about all these kind of terms, as I said, because they always change. One of the things that I
Mm-hmm.
always use as an example in my classes or when I talk, because I work a lot with bio and wet media,
Mm-hmm.
is the concept of biohacking, right?
Oh,
When I
yeah.
started working on this like 20 years ago or 15 years ago,
Yeah.
um, biohacking was like this cool thing about like using wet media and things like that. But then this idea in the popular imagination is like all this like fitness industry and like
Yeah.
proteins and things like that. So
I was gonna
it's a
say.
term that has changed so much and that nobody uses it anymore in the art world in the way that it was used a few years ago.
Yeah, it was very, if I remember, like late 90s, early 2000s type
Yeah.
situation that I first started hearing about biohacking in terms of like bio art, right? Uh yeah, interesting stuff, how even our terminology changes throughout time. We have to keep up with it. And because technology advances so quickly, that means that the art is advancing at a quite rapid pace as well, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is the latest thing that I'm working on. I am the recipient of the editorial grant by this program called Backslash at Cornell Tech in New York City, which is a
Yay.
yes, which is a program that pairs artists with engineers and technologists at Cornell Tech to create artworks. It's been running since 2016, and it's created a lot of very interesting artworks in these 10 years, but it is very unknown in academic circles as well. So I guess they wanted to have somebody to 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 write about it, right? So I am the inaugural editorial grantee, and I'm having really a great time just like delving into these practices, the experiences that all these artists have had with engineers and faculty at Cornell to create these artworks, and it's just been really really fascinating. And we're still working on it, right, Connie?
Yeah, absolutely. Rodrigo's such a good writer. And the first piece that he wrote is excellent. It talks about the history. Well, you can talk more about it. It talks the history of Backslash as, this internal organization, right? And how it has created opportunities for artists, for researchers, for students at Cornell Tech. Um, how was your experience doing all the interviews for your first article, Rodrigo?
This is really where I shine, I think, just like talking to people and like doing a little bit of investigative kind of journalism, I guess. It was great. Some of the artists I knew from before, I'm not personally, but I knew of their work. But it was nice to be able to just talk to them about their process, their experience. I really like that many of the artists have had very distinct experiences. Some was a little bit more bumpy because one of the specificities of Backslash is that they are not really working with artists that already have an established art and technology practice.
Right. Yeah.
They are working with artists who are thinking about technology and science and knowledge, but not like, as I said, like a very established technological practice. And then they pair them with a technologist or a scientist. So some of the artists that I spoke to, they felt a little bit like out of their depth, or they felt like that, well, this was very new. They didn't know what to do. Others were very, they had it figured out. So it was interesting for me to speak to all of them. And yes, that article that it's gonna come out soon, hopefully.
Yay. Stay tuned.
It's stay tuned. Yes, it is really about the history of the program, but also like what makes it special, what makes it different. My conversations with the artists and with the technologists, which is something that we often forget. Like all this, speaking of collaboration, honey, the people who have collaborated with them, most of them have been recent graduates of Cornell Tech or current graduate students. So I really wanted to really shine a light on their contributions, of the engineers, and just try to see how the collaboration happened.
Well, it's really impressive. Like everything you're doing, and like all the energy that you must have. Like, do you have any biohack? No, I'm kidding. Any biohacking tips? No. It is really good to have all these initiatives, right? Because this, in a way, is similar to what we're trying to do at New Media Caucus, trying to prop up people into the space, especially people who don't usually have these spaces available to them, right?
It's about building communities as well, right? Within the field, I think. And because the field is so interdisciplinary, it's really interesting, but it's also really rewarding having the ability to collaborate, right? To have researchers, to have art historians, to have artists, practitioners, curators, archivists, right? And there's so many more as well. I guess one of the last questions I have for you, Rodrigo, is what are you most excited about for the future in your work?
A couple of things.
Perfect.
The first thing, I want to do more non-academic writing, and I'm excited about that. I think that maybe I have focused a lot, besides the curatorial practice with my writing, I've done a lot more academic kind of writing, and I want to reach more diverse audiences. That's why I also think that this podcast is great as well. What the New Media Caucus does is really, really great because it reaches really a lot of different people. So I'm excited to start to delve into more like non-academic outlets. The other thing that I'm excited about is just to continue to try to bring different voices together. Particularly, I hate to say the word underrepresented or unrepresented, but people who have, or artists or practices that have not been exposed too much, right? I really like to bring those in and also make connections with things that are not usually put together. In 2027, I'm going to do a show at the NARS Foundation in Brooklyn, where I'm going to bring the work of a few artists. One of them is Alvaro Azcárraga, who's another Mexican artist who works with biotechnology, and he's thinking about genetically modified maize, and he's trying to graft genetically modified corn or maize with teosinte, which is the ancestor of corn, in a very like biotechnological kind of way. But I'm putting him in conversation in the show with a printmaker who is a more traditional artist working with linocut and woodcuts, printmaking, and with another artist also from Mexico, Daris Rubio, who is a textile artist. So I'm just really interested in like putting these works together and how they interact with each other, how they talk to each other in a way that I haven't seen done too much. Because again, as Renee, you pointed out, we're often exposed to digital art in the 21st century, or like AI and art or something. So I'm trying to really put things together that are not usually put together. So I'm excited to continue working on those things, and then I hopefully will finish my PhD soon. I'm at the very late stages of my work, ABD as they say, all for
so exciting. Yeah, congratulations.
So hopefully will be finished soon and started to just look at jobs, which really terrifies me. And Connie, that's something that you have more recently gone through. So I'm probably gonna pick your brain about that.
Of course.
So, first of all, thank you so much for giving us this time, because obviously the holidays are coming and it's like a hectic time for everyone, trying to go home for some of you, or receiving people are coming home to you. So it's always a challenging time. So thank you for your time. I think we all learned a little bit more, not only about you, but about like new media, the practice, and all these other things that we do, and you do specifically. And I think on my part, well, before to sign off, Constanza, you want to add something?
No, this was really excellent. It was really rewarding having you, because I've been working with you for a little while now, right? So I always thought you'd be the perfect person to interview for our podcast as well. And given that you've been working with New Media Caucus too. So thank you for your time, Ray. And sign off.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for the invitation. I really like what the New Media Caucus does. And I also want to be more involved and more with you all. So thank you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna do the boilerplate stuff. So first of all, thank you all for listening to this episode. We will be taking a break. We will not be releasing an episode in January because we need to breathe. But also, I want to invite you to like and subscribe. Yeah, I know this is the YouTuber thing, but it really does help us to raise our numbers and justify like existing, right?
In the digital age.
In the digital age, likes and subscriptions are the real currency. Sad. And other than that, thank you so much. Don't forget to tune in February, and we'll see you next time.
Happy
Bye.
holidays. Bye.